Alright, Eric, I'm going to give my first shot here to the screencast. Hopefully this will be a good way for us to share some development code we're doing. But to get started, just explain real quick what we have going on. We have the Vagrant Drupal Development environment, that VDD, and the content management system that we're managing separately as two different Git repositories. But we have the CMS added as a subrepository under the VDD. And I'll just show you real quick how to get that up and running. So the first command to do this is just the git clone command, like you've been doing in the past. So you'll see it here. So it's basically just git clone, and then there's an additional recursive flag added in there. And what that recursive flag is going to do is going to go ahead and add submodules that are in the Git repository you're cloning. So that is going to go ahead and clone the full CMS from a specific commit that it's at. So we'll talk about what we have to do to make sure that commits up to the latest version. But right now, go ahead and enter that command in, and you'll see that it goes ahead and clones everything on there, and then it clones the CMS next. So that's what it's doing right now, and that's knocked out and done. So now you can go ahead and see that we have in fact clone the VDD, and that's sitting right there. So we'll jump into the VDD itself. Just take a quick peek at what's under the covers there. So let's jump right into the CMS initially and make sure we have the most up-to-date version. So in order to do that, when you go ahead and run git checkout master, and what that's going to do is going to move our head to the actual master branch, which is what our production environment is working off of on the CMS. And then just to make sure we're fully up to date with what's going on the master branch, we'll do a quick git pull. That's going to go ahead and contact the server, say, alright, we're good to go. So up to date on that one. Alright. So now let's go ahead and step back one directory and talk a little bit about the VDD itself. So the config.json file contains all the configurations that we might ever really need to change for the VDD, at least initially. And so you'll see right about, let's see, let me get back up to the top of the file here. There's an entry for the CMS directory, and that's the host path. So we're pointing to that CMS directory that we're cloning through GitHub. And so that's what the host path is. That's pointing to a directory that's actually maintained on your local computer, and the virtual machine just happens to read that directory for that particular path, which is where all your web hosting is done through the virtual machine, in essence, if that makes any sense. The next thing to look at here in this config file are the domain names. So we have one that I set up for the SanCouncil, and in this case it's just a local domain name, so it doesn't have any impact on any of the remote sites. So if you go to your computer and actually have to change your hosts file to make this URL map to the port that we're loading, which is the 192.168.44.44. Anyways, once you get that reflected in there, then you can go ahead and access everything through that SanCouncil.dev URL locally on your machine. But again, that's only locally on your machine. You're seeing that, but you can always use the IP address raw, anyways. So anyways, okay, enough about the config file. Not a lot there. So now we're ready to go ahead and bring up the Vagrant virtual machine. So since we're in the VDD directory, that's just a simple Vagrant up command. And this is the first time we're doing this, so it's going to take quite some time because it's actually provisioning the machine, so it's installing the virtual machine for the very first time. And what that's doing is basically taking a template. There's some recipes out there, they're called, using this application called Chef, and what it's doing, it's creating a standardized environment that we can edit through a configuration file if necessary in the future. And usually what you do is you make that configuration file mirror what your host is. In this case, I kind of deem that it's decent enough to match what is going on in HostMonster straight out of the box, so I didn't mess with any of that stuff yet, but we might need to in the future or in other projects. So anyways, like I said, it's going to take a while. Let's see. And then next time, this revisioning stuff only happens once, so the next time you boot this up using the Vagrant up commands, it will go very, very fast, even if the machine had been off. It's just going to be rapid. Hey, virtual machine's on, and just like booting a small virtual machine inside your computer. So I'm going to pause this until that's complete, and I'll come back and finish the rest of this up. Alright, so that provisioning went ahead and wrapped up. So now, this is what you should see, so I'm going to clear that screen out of our way here. And then, at this point, what we can do is we can tunnel into, I guess tunnel, or SSH, secure shell, into our virtual machine by running the Vagrant SSH command. And that's exactly what that's going to do. It's going to give us console access to the virtual machine. So you can see that now we're actually on a new machine here. I'll clear that window up as well. And so an important thing to note here is we have two things going on. We have the work that's being done on the virtual machine and the work that's being done on your local computer. So right now, obviously, we're logged into the virtual machine, which is considered the development environment. It's in essence a clone of the production environment, or ultimately will be. So just real quick, I'll show you a couple things that are kind of might throw you for a loop. And the first one is this. So if we look at the directory structure under the virtual machine, we have the directory of sites. So we'll go ahead and roll into the sites, and we'll roll right into Drupal 7 just for grins here. Now keep in mind that we've cloned the CMS, so that theoretically should be here, and I believe it is. Yep, so it's right there. That's from the GitHub clone that we did. But if I go ahead and try to run any kind of git commands from the virtual machine on this directory, so for example status, just to get the status, it doesn't record it as a git repository. So basically what that means is that any commits or branching, anything you do with regards to git would have to be done in your local machine. So let's go ahead and jump back to the local machine. So we'll just exit this SSH session. Now we're back on local here. I'll clear that up. So we'll CD into the CMS site. Now we're looking at the CMS. We can see on into Drupal 7. Oh, see, Drupal 7. Alright. So now we're here, and then any git commands should now work, no issues. So it's looking like it's a normal git repository. And of course, actually the root CMS is the main repository for that. So you'll see the same message for the root of the CMS. But the reason why I wanted to CD into the Drupal 7 was to go ahead and show you interesting caveat with the drush command. So we're starting to dig into that drush command that allows us to do a lot of the module maintenance through the command line. Now let's say I want to go ahead and enable a particular module I have. So let's go ahead and enable views through drush. I'm going to do this here on the local machine, I'll keep in mind. And I'm getting a couple errors here, and they're kind of linked, saying command PM enable needs a higher bootstrap level to run. You will need to invoke the drush command for more functional Drupal environment to run this command. Basically what that is telling us is that we're really not in a Drupal environment. So although we have the files and whatnot set up there, we don't have drush set up to work on our local machine the way that it's going to be set up in the development environment. So that being said, let's go ahead and go back to the development environment. It's going to put us back right there. Okay, now we go SSH back into the virtual machine development machine. development environment, development machine, kind of use this interchangeably with the virtual machine. That's the same thing. Alright, so here we are. We are now back in the virtual machine, and once we cd to sites Drupal 7, we can go ahead and run the drush en views command, and you will see, well, that's not good. We'll just ignore that error we just got a second ago, because I think it's related to us not having loaded the site up completely yet. So we'll move on to the next part, which is how we actually now take what's on the production environment and move it down to the development environment. So if you think about it, we have a production environment that users are getting in, logging in, adding content and whatnot, and there's no way we can duplicate that in our development environment. And also, we don't want to maintain two separate databases. If we maintain a development database and we maintain a production database, eventually we'd have to merge the two of those together. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So the best practice we're going with is just merging everything, or really taking our production database down and using that throughout everything. So any changes that require modifications inside of the database would have to be made on the production side. But that's going to be primarily related to content. And in a few future screencasts, I'll talk to you about what features are, and that's one way of overcoming some issues with modules that are kind of intrinsically linked to databases. So we can do more system administration on the development side, and we can let the users kind of handle their own content on the production side and use that in testing. Anyways, enough on that. We're moving the production environment and database down. So let's go ahead and show you how we do that. So the first thing is we're going to run the rsync command. Whoops. And I'll show you how we want to call this here. Of course, that's not going to work here. Okay. Sorry, I was trying to do a shortcut there. I'll just have to type it all by hand here. So bear with me. So we'll run this rsync command, and what it's basically doing is it's going to create a tunnel over to the production server and pull down the files for us via kind of secure file transfer, if you will, type of protocol. So anyways, so what I'm doing here is I'm using an rsync tool to reach out to the production server, download a copy of the database, and this is actually something I set up as a cron job on the server side. So this file is getting updated every 5 minutes from the actual database. It's just a flat file, copies the database over. So that's what the Drupal7.db piece is. So that's what we're going to end up with on our local side here. It's just going to put it into the home directory after running that command. And we're going to get this message for the first time whenever you try to log into a secure host, and that should be acceptable. Should be no issues there. So just type yes and enter it in. And then of course this is our shared password. Alright, so you'll see Drupal7.db got downloaded, and again that's the copy of the database. It's updated every 5 minutes on the server, on the production server side. So now we pull that down into our environment. So we grab that. The next step is go to take that file and dump that into our local development database. So this is the mysql command to go ahead and do that. So we're identifying Drupal 7 as the database, and then user is going to just be root, and the password is going to also be root as well. And you'll note there's no space between the P and the password for that particular command. And then this isn't a secure, we don't have to keep those passwords secure or anything. They are literally just on your local machine, so you kind of control access through your computer there. But then we're referencing that database file, Drupal drupal7.db, and when we enter that in, it's going to go ahead and load it up. If, of course, I can find the file, which for some reason, I think, yeah, on the rsync command you actually have to specify your destination directory, or yeah, destination directory as well. So I failed to do that. So let's go ahead and fix that. Oops. Alright. So now we should see. I know it also helps if I'm in the proper directory. Shoot, okay. Yeah, let's try that again. Sorry, yeah, so what I did is I just typed CD to get me back to the home directory under the development environment. So now, here we should see Drupal7DB, and of course now my MySQL commands will be able to find that file, now that I've done that correctly. Alright, so now the MySQL, the database itself, is up to date with everything from the production side. Then finally what I'm going to do is we have to go ahead and move over all of our static files that are located on the production server as well. So there's things like public pictures and logos and that kind of stuff that users would be able to change. And so these are located on the server side under sites. And we're just going to grab all of them, and then we're going to copy that over to locally here, sites. Oops. Sites Drupal 7. Let's get out of the way here. That's just default. So basically mirroring the same thing on our side. Files. Alright. Again, password. I don't think I got that right. That'll just take a second to grab some of the images that are already out there. Alright, now that that's gone through, what we can do is we can go ahead and theoretically we should be able to just go ahead and run our browser and see this pop on up. So let me open a new window up here and then just run it through the URL. Minimize it so you can actually see everything. So, like I kind of said earlier, we have our own local development domain name. That could also, of course, be the IP address as well, but in this case I'll just use the domain name. And there we are. We now have a fresh version that mirrors all the content of the production side. So hopefully this clears up some of the confusion you might have been having, and of course if not, just let me know and I can try to make this a little bit of a better tutorial. Again, this is my first one, so hopefully this is of some value of some kind. So, alright man, catch you later.